Welcome to Grounded with Jon and Maritsa. Georgiou, we are so glad that you are here with us.
We all have to get in this fight, and we have to do it now.
Listeners over a certain age will most certainly recognize that voice. It's legendary political journalist Sam Donaldson. He covered every presidential election from 1964 to 2013. He served as ABC's Watergate correspondent. He was actually next to President Reagan when he was shot and co-anchored ABC's Sunday political show This Week, among many, many other things, Senator.
Yeah, well, Sam has been around for a while. And I can tell you, when I first got elected in 1998, the press was entirely different then than it is today. And I think it's going to be interesting when we talk to Sam Donaldson about what he's seen and what role the press plays in what we're seeing today, by the way, with with all sorts of different outlets. 15 years ago, my niece says, "Where do I go to get the news? It's actually news that I can believe in." And my suggestion was her to use as many outlets as possible and use your ability to critically think and get through it. But the truth is it's not in the days, today is not in the same day it was when Sam Donaldson first started reporting back in maybe even the 50s, but certainly in the 60s. And it's a different world out there, and it's a lot harder to find the information that's incredibly, it's very important to have that's accurate. So we look forward to hearing from Sam.
Yeah, we can't wait to get into our chat with him. But before we do, let's prime our audience with some major headlines over last week. No surprise, I'm going to say it again, inundated with breaking news, shocking headlines. News just this Sunday morning as we record here, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says on Meet the Press he will not step down, even though there have been calls for him to step down after voting to pass the continuing resolution. And this comes as a recent Quinnipiac poll shows Democrats face historic low approval with their base. What do you make of this from the outside, Senator?
So I think it's really easy, not being in the middle of the fight, to throw stones. I think it's also important to understand that the continuing resolution extension of the last budget, which it wasn't truly not exactly what it was, but it certainly wasn't where it needed to be from an appropriation standpoint, from my perspective. When I was in the Senate, we worked on a bill that should have been passed before the end of September, and if we'd have done that, we wouldn't be here. That's what we should be mad at Chuck Schumer about. The truth is a government shutdown is not something that bodes well for working families and small businesses in this country. It doesn't bode well for the taxpayer. Do I think the Democrats could have done a better job messaging this to get it out, to talk about why a government shutdown would have been bad? Yeah, I do. And they never did that till after the fact. And so, look, I don't think Schumer should step down. I know there's a lot of people out there that are screaming and hollering at him. That's good reason for that. People are upset. People are scared. I get information from them every day. But the bottom line is this: Democrats need to do a better job fighting for working families and small businesses in this country, and they need to let people know what they're doing. Because quite frankly, most of the folks I talk to think the Democrats are AWOL, that they're not doing anything. They are doing stuff, but they're just not getting that information out to the people across the country.
The Trump administration announced plans to end temporary legal status for more than 500,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. They're scheduled to end April 24th. Now, Trump made this campaign promise. I'm sure you remember that he would start in Springfield, Ohio. That was after he made wild claims about Haitians in Springfield. They're legally, by the way, that they were eating cats and dogs. Now, side note, I went to Springfield. I hosted a special there. We found no evidence of that, and instead a very scared community.
Yeah. So look, I think that if folks are here illegally, I think it's the expectation of everybody, including myself, that they follow the law. I do think that when it comes to grabbing people and shipping out of the country, that means the president needs to make sure they've done their due diligence to make sure these folks are here illegally without the proper documentation. It shouldn't be done because of any claims being made. It should be done based on fact. And in the end, I don't think there's anybody that I know, at least, that wants to see people here that are here illegally. But they've got to treat people in humane ways and make sure they're dealing with the facts. And I think that's really the bottom line.
Okay, so all of this comes as a federal judge grilled the DOJ in a hearing over the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelans to El Salvador. Trump used a centuries old wartime law to do it, basically without due process, claiming they are gang members. Now, Trump denied signing the order, didn't explicitly say who did, but then he was fact checked, and his name and his signature is on the bottom of that order. This judge vowed to get to the bottom of it, hold the administration accountable. This all came after Trump called for this specific judge to be impeached. That prompted a rare public comment from Chief Justice John Roberts, who pushed back on the president. Wow, that's a whole lot, but we're not even done with this little timeline, because just Sunday morning, Trump's border czar was on This Week, said he won't defy court orders, while also saying he doesn't care what the judges think.
Yeah, it's mixed messages, and it's why people are very concerned about where we're at in the country today. I think that it speaks to the fact that things are done a bit haphazardly, and that might be generous. Um, and and like I said before, we're a country of laws. We have three branches of government, the co-equal branches of government. The congressional branch, the legislative branch, is basically not shown up for the last 2 months. But nonetheless, the courts are, and they're doing their job. And when they do their job and it's a decision you don't like, you don't call for impeachment. You appeal the decision and go to the next level. And that's what needs to be done. But the bottom line is this: we need to follow the law. We need to make sure due diligence is done so that innocent people aren't unnecessarily hurt here. That being said, and you know this, Maritza, because we talked about this before, I believe strongly that we need to secure the borders, ports. We need to make sure we know who's coming into this country. And if they're here without the proper documentation, they need to go home.
If we are going back to a decade where Sam Donaldson was running around the White House, this next headline would have taken up all of the oxygen for multiple news cycles. But here we are. I think it's the fourth story down here. Trump officially signed an executive order Thursday to do away with the Department of Education, even though that will take an act of Congress. He also announced that all federal student loans will now be overseen by the Small Business Administration. We're talking about 43 million borrowers, about $1.6 trillion in loans. But there's one more related headline to this. It was also announced that the SBA will cut staff by more than 40%. How are they going to handle this?
It's an oxymoron. It's two things that are butting heads here. First of all, I should start out by saying I'm glad that Congress is going to play a role if they're actually going to dismantle the Department of Education. I think Congress needs to play a role in that to make sure that whatever's done, Congress's fingerprints are on it. I would also tell you that the cost of college is very, very high. There's a ton of kids, what'd you say, 43 million borrowers out there that have loans. If this is screwed up, it could put these young Americans in a position where they may never get out of debt. We should be looking at ways, Congress should be looking at ways, the president should be looking at ways to making college more affordable and making sure these loans have the lowest possible interest rate possible. Why? Because these folks who are going to college that's our economy. That's the foundation for our economy moving forward with workforce and with entrepreneurs. And I'm going to tell you, pushing in the Small Business Administration and then cutting that agency with 40% of the employees, I don't know how they figure they're going to get the work done. And done right, by the way. And so it's a problem out there. You know, I think government works, business works, but if you don't have the employees do it right, it doesn't work very well. And my concern here is that it may be popular to get rid of the Department of Education. Not in my mind, by the way. I think it plays a very important role. And I'm a former school board member that served on the local school board and know how much control they have. I'm a legislator and knows how much control the legislature has. The government is the bottom of that food chain. And, but the truth is that they do play an important role, especially when it comes to college loans and helping out kids who are disabled.
I literally just paid off my student loans this January, and I was the recipient of Pell Grants. So I can tell you I'm a product of both of those programs, and I do question how that's going to be for future borrowers. Okay, If you or a loved one relies on Social Security, this probably has you talking. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on a podcast when he said the easiest way to find fraud is to stop payments and listen, because whoever screams is the one stealing. Now, remember, Elon Musk has called Social Security the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. And now that Doge is trying to access sensitive information from the Social Security Administration, a lot of people even more concerned. Just to spell this out clearly, though, this is something we pay into. We pay into Social Security.
Yeah, we pay into it, and we've got an investment in it and get it out. And I would just say this. One of the challenges I have, and I don't care if it's with Elon Musk being the richest man in the world or Howard Lutnick, and I don't know what kind of wealth and resources you have, but I can tell you that a lot of the folks I know, this is their retirement. And yeah, you pull away their money, damn right they're going to be screaming, and they didn't do anything wrong, and they're not a part of fraud. And I'm going to tell you, I think the fraud thing is totally overblown when it comes to Social Security. And I think that in the end, there's going to be a lot of people suffer because this is doing things that don't need to be done. And a lot of people are going to be put in a position where if they follow through, are going to be put in a position where they don't have the only retirement support they have. And by the way, it's not a big check. And so you take that away, you're going to have a lot of elderly people in poverty, and that's not a good look for the richest country in the world.
Steve Bannon made headlines again this week on News Nation when he said that Donald Trump will run for and win a third term. When pressed on how he's going to do that, he said, well, they're working on it. As far as I know, there's no loophole here around this, because if there were, I think we would have seen a lot more presidents try it. But if this is something they go after, do you think that we could see, I don't know, former President Obama stepping back up for a third term?
I would be surprised, but maybe. I don't know. I think that I think it's once again, it's why people are concerned about what's going on in the country today. They hear all this stuff, and there's a lot of stuff coming out every day of the week, and they're saying, "Look, this doesn't make a lot of sense." I just listened to the new senator from Utah say that he absolutely would not support a third term for anybody, including George Washington, which George is long gone. But the truth is that talk is cheap until it gets to the floor. And hopefully they'll live up to that, because the truth is that the system has worked pretty well since it was changed back in the 40s, I believe, and we'll see how it works.
We have a lot to talk about now. We want to bring in our guest to dissect some of these headlines and more. He's no stranger to any of this, to politics or to journalism. Sam Donaldson started working for ABC News in the 1960s. He's a dear family friend. I'm so glad to welcome him here to Grounded with us. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Maritsa. I'm very happy to be with you and with Senator Chester. Your sated grandfather, who's no longer with us, was a good friend of mine, Barry Zavan. And although Senator Chester and I have not met personally, I think I know him pretty well because I've watched him for a while in the Senate from afar. I'm no longer practicing journalism, as you know, directly, and have generally thought he did a good job.
He came with his research, Senator. He knows a lot about you.
Well, that's scary and that's good, but it's good to have you on, Sam, and I think that it truly is a pleasure. One of the things about this podcast, it's allowed me to visit with folks that just like you, I've seen from afar and admired, and certainly have admired your work since I was a kid. And appreciate you being on today. I'm going to start out and
keep going. I was enjoying what you were saying.
Exactly. You like the kudos. So I would just say that, press has changed a lot over the last many years. I've been involved in politics for 25 years now at the state and the federal level. And I can tell you that it's changed a lot in that time. And I'm sure your history goes back a lot further than mine. Could you talk about how the press has changed and how that's impacted where we're at today from your perspective?
Well, yes, we've changed. The country's changed, and the press, where the dog's tail is being wagged or we wag the tail, people can debate. But I tell you that this is the capitalistic system. And I believe it's probably the best system with all of its faults and the need for regulation and all of that. But the press works for most organizations. It seems the president is about to do away with the one or two organizations that do not depend on advertising, do not depend on public support in the sense of the money that is paid. The press is in a quandary. When I first started 2 weeks in Washington after John F. Kennedy became president, took the oath of office, and in those days, if there were 5,000 reporters in Washington, I was the 5,000th and first. But I loved the town and I learned it, and I had the opportunity early on to cover your Senate. Well, not your Senate, but a Senate. I was there the night the Southern filibuster was broken in 1964, so the great Civil Rights Act, which did away with the jury segregation, could pass. It was proposed by President Kennedy, but it was Lyndon Johnson who got it passed. And I watched how people worked in the Senate on both sides of the aisle with different ideologies and, of course, different parties, and contended, which was the right thing to do. But in the end, regular order was achieved. The minority that lost the vote to the majority in the final analysis accepted it, said, well, next time maybe we'll change it or what have you. And it was business as usual. And I never heard what they said in the cloakrooms I was not privy to, a cross word of any distinction, and certainly no vulgarity. I mean, what's not too many years ago, the Vice President of the United States, with the C-SPAN now present in those days already, looked at a senator from Vermont and said, and I can't repeat it here. So things have changed, and the news media has changed with it, trying to keep up. And if there was one thing, and then I'll shut up for a moment, but it's very difficult for me to shut up now, Senator Maritsa knows this, but you can restrain me. I say only graciously,
We wouldn't do that.
if I could change one thing, it would be to eliminate the internet. Well, of course, I don't want to do that. The things that the internet has brought us worldwide are beneficial in so many respects. But in my business, it hurt us badly. You used to, nationally, when I started, wanted to get news about something other than your hometown, you watched ABC, CBS, or NBC. That was it. And we all, in those days, with some exceptions, in every profession, in any craft, we tried to do it right. We tried to find out what the facts were on a story that we were covering, on a person we were covering, and report the facts the best we could get verification for them to our viewers, our listeners. And you accepted it because those were your sources nationally, and the newspapers. It could be the Chicago Tribune, very conservative. Could be the New York Times or the Washington Post, not conservative. But you got your news from responsible newspapers that made an effort to get the facts right and then argue what they meant. And in my business in those days, the thought that we would put our own opinion in, except on specialty programs like the Brinkley Show, where we had a round table and were expected to give our opinions, and it was known that's what we were doing. We kept it out the best we could of our business. But today on the internet, you can find every bit of false information, not just false because whoever thinks they're a reporter didn't ever check it out and didn't get it right, but on purpose. On purpose. It's the big lie. It's excuse me, but you have to look at history. It's Goebbels operating. Tell a lie often enough, and people will start believing it, particularly if you can keep opposite views away from them. I don't know whether people of Germany, how many of them knew what was going on. Well, a lot of them who said, well, I didn't realize what was going on. Probably was true because they were told so much which was wrong, false, and they believed it because there was no alternative. What's happening is so rapidly approaching a dictatorship that to say, well, we'll handle it tomorrow. The courts will take care of it. We all have to get in this fight, and we have to do it now.
I want to ask you more about that, Sam, because I just read a story that you were once in Buenos Aires and you spoke to a man who had one time been Goebbels' press secretary, the propaganda minister.
He was a propaganda minister, and the man I spoke to had become a young member of the SS, the German organization of the elites, and he worked as a press agent for the administration's press agent. And we talked about it. He had a big picture of Hitler on the wall. He said, when I met Hitler toward the end, and I mean, them eyes were magnetic and all that. And we talked about just what I said. Tell a lie often enough, doesn't matter. Lie. And this president we have now, I've known him for 40 years as a businessman, and he doesn't care about the law. He's evaded the law successfully, except in one or two cases, all the way along the line. He's followed Roy Cohn, the lawyer who was with Senator McCarthy looking for communists under every bed and in every closet and at the State Department in the 50s. And Cohn said to him, we don't have to, just do what you want to. And sure, someone will come, a prosecutor, we'll delay, and we'll argue the case to Americans who don't have or care to find other sources. And the senator was so right. I to advise people today, watch Fox. I think Fox is a propaganda organization for the most part, with some people on it who are not in that way. But watch it, find out what they're saying, then check it with other people. Don't take my word for it. Check it all. Check it all.
So I've got a question for you there. Danny Inouye, Senator Danny Inouye, who I'm sure you knew pretty well.
I knew him well, and I thought he was great.
He was an incredible human being. I used to have lunch with him. He was alive. He passed away right after the election in 2012, and I used to have lunch with him for those 6 years. And I asked Danny one day, I said, we're in a divided country. I think we all can agree with that. And we were divided back in 2012. I said, have you ever seen it this divided? And his response was in the mid-'60s. And you talked about the Civil Rights Act and then the things that happened then. And I said, what caused it to change? And he thought for a minute, and then he said, I don't know. So I'm asking you the same question. You lived in the 60s, reported in the 60s. It was a very divisive time. The 1960s were. I remember it as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But are the times then comparable to today, as far as division standpoints? And if you have an answer to that question, I'd love to hear it. What caused it to change? Because we did come together as a country again, and I don't know why.
Well, I was born in the Depression. I didn't fight in World War II. I was 7 when Yamamoto and his gang dropped bombs on Pearl Harbor. And the day before that, the country was very divided. Charles Lindbergh, the great aviator who flew the Atlantic, led a group of Americans who were almost a majority, but not quite, in being isolationist. We had nothing to do with the wars in Europe. Let's stay out of it. Let's have peace. But the moment we were bombed, everyone understood there was no peace, and people got together and worked hard. No one said, by the way, Senator, well, we can't afford another aircraft carrier. Spend the money and win the war with our allies. And we did. And then very smart afterwards. And we were still a united nation. Well, we had differences, again, viewpoints and what have you, but as a people. And we didn't hate each other and say it. Maybe one person, but not everyone.
Right.
That went through the 50s and was a kind of a period when the Cold War was heated up. The Soviets got atomic weapons. Even after Stalin died, they were great menace. And we had to, as John Kennedy said in his inaugural address, make every effort, fight every fight for peace. And we were okay as this nation was the biggest dog in the world still. And then came Vietnam. And Vietnam was the turning point to me in which we began to divide on a major issue. And Lyndon Johnson, who might have gone down as the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln, certainly on civil rights, maybe today he classifies there, didn't know much about foreign policy, but he tapped his telephones, not in the office system, which would automatically begin as Richard Nixon had when voices were heard. But you can hear him at the National Archives talking one night in 1964 as he's running for election in his own right about Vietnam with Richard Russell, his mentor, as a senior senator from Georgia. And you said, and I'm going to imitate him, not to poke fun. Dick, he said, I don't know what to do. I know we can't win in Vietnam. I don't know, but I don't know what to do. If I tried to withdraw now, they'd ride me out of town on the rails. He was probably right. Americans were anti-communist and were not yet understanding that communism as a system is not going to work, and we should oppose it in the sense of trying to help other people and other nations get rid of it. But unless it threatened us, and Ho Chi Minh of Vietnam had no ships, no airplanes, he had no ability to attack the United States. In fact, the Vietnamese wanted to live together after the French were expelled, which followed after the Japanese were expelled. And Ho Chi Minh had been educated in the United States and thought we were going to be his best friend. No, he was a dirty commie. And Lyndon Johnson was right. If Johnson had tried to withdraw, he would have been, I don't know. And Kennedy told people, when I get reelected, we're out of Vietnam. I talked to one of them, and you know the name, Senator. He was the Majority Leader Mike Mansfield from the great state of Montana. And I called him up. He was at 96, which is still coming down to his office in the 90s. And said, people say that John Kennedy said he'd withdraw. Then he said, yep. I said, well, Senator, can I come down with a camera and an interview on it? No. Mike was a man of few words. I know I ramble on, but Vietnam to me, in my lifetime, and particularly I became a working reporter, was the turning point. The nation never came back and has never come back since. Briefly, maybe for a few months after 9/11, into a solidarity of purpose and people saying we have to do it and we have to do it this way. But today, look what happens. The president defies the courts, and he's going to. If he can get away with it, he's going to. He's not someone who understands. Well, he may understand the Constitution, but who believes in it. John Tester, you remember the campaign. You were so vigorously in it in your own sake there. But when he said before the last November election, hey, folks, vote for me this time and you may never have to vote again. And what he meant, of course, was he would now be a supreme dictator. And he's on his road to try to do it. Look what he's done about the plane going to El Salvador. I mean, look at they're telling the judge so far as we speak, no, they're not going to give him the answers to his question of what were the exact times, when were they? Because if they can get away with it, and the Chief Justice tried, I know, but his statement was so even-handed in a way. Now you shouldn't talk about impeachment. It's not the American way. No. Ultimately, I think the Supreme Court will get these cases that are bubbling up all over now. People suing, fortunately, against the wrongdoings that this man and this administration want to do to America and to Americans. So that if the court should stumble and say, well, that may be okay just in this one instance, oh, we're lost.
Sam, you were known for being an antagonist when you worked in the White House. And I want to know what it's like for you to watch this administration in a building where you spent so much of your professional life, and how you would handle this administration if you were in the front row there of the Brady briefing room today.
Well, I don't think I could do any better than there are very good reporters in that briefing room, trying to do it right, trying to get information correctly, trying to shield their viewers, their readers, their listeners from the lies themselves. But I had it so easy compared to them. No president in a primetime news conference would say to me, well, you're a disgrace. You should be fired. Well, Jim Acosta of CNN, his first time around, was said that by the president of the United States. Now, they may have thought it, but we had an understanding that the press and presidents, we know what their job was and respected it. And they knew what our job was, and they didn't like it, when much of the time we thought our job was to press them on why you did this and what is your plan for tomorrow. And did you actually say that? And they dodge and weave. Uh, Maybe once in a while you'd say a president would lie, but I can't remember Jimmy Carter telling a public lie, and I didn't know him privately. And so it was easy for me to ask any question I thought appropriate. And I asked uncomfortable questions, uncomfortable in the sense that uh, the president would not want to have to try to answer it, perhaps, but had to try to give some answer. He never could say, next, I don't care.
I got one more question for you, Sam, and that is that a loving time reporter, a generational reporter, who's now a regular citizen, regular person. I get asked all the time, what can we do to affect change in the country right now as a regular person? Would you have any recommendations for those people?
A great question. I sit here frustrated. Let's get in there. I just told you a few moments ago, we have all in this fight. What can I do? Well, yes, during this last campaign, I gave a little money, but insignificant amounts compared to the big boys who, under the Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, allowed the big oligarchs to just pour millions and now sometimes billions into campaigns. I knew it was not going to make much difference, but it just gave me an idea that I'm helping. But you're right. I think we have to, whatever we can, wherever we can, make our voices heard. And I don't mean that I'm suggesting everybody should go down to the street corner and get a poster but join certain demonstrations. I admire so many of my friends, particularly women, who some time ago participated in the Great March on Washington on the road decision. The more people who will make their voices heard, even in small, hey, Big Sandy, even in small communities, even in small places, the better chance we have of stopping him, because his people are there. His base is there. And as you can see, the Congress at the moment in its makeup is there for him. Sorry. It's sorry. I know that probably friends of yours from the Republican side, because you were able to make friends on both sides, who in the Senate think he's not doing the right thing, think he's bad for the country, and either are afraid of the retaliation or the fact they wouldn't get reelected, or for some reason to speak out. They don't want to be the lone voice. They don't want to do that. And so the legislature has become invalid at the moment from the standpoint of being part of the solution. But it's got to hold. The courts have got to hold.
Sam, let me ask you a little bit more about that, because a lot of people are pointing also to Elon Musk and his vast fortune. And I'm wondering if there's anyone in history that you can think of that would compare to Elon Musk in terms of his wealth and influence, and the threats on funding primaries for any lawmakers that might go against the Trump administration.
Well, I don't think so, although I wasn't there when Teddy Roosevelt, as president, was fighting J.P. Morgan and some of the very wealthy people in New York who were running the country and successfully fighting them. I mean, I like this Churchill quote, who once said, apparently, that you can count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. Well, we may be in that position right now of trying everything else. Elon Musk, though, is feeling the pressure. He has lost. He was worth, several weeks ago, apparently $400 billion. Today, just a few weeks later, he's only worth $300 billion. He's lost $100 billion on Tesla and his other programs. And look what's happening. People are turning in their Teslas. I'm against firebombing Teslas. I'm against violence. I think all of us would be able to say that. Although if it comes, I know which side I'm going to be on. Because, Senator, like you, we're country boys. I grew up with guns. I know how to use them. And I'm not saying I'm going to. I'm just simply saying, if it comes to that, hey, both sides have problem for violence. And I've rambled on here too long. I think I feel passionately about it, and maybe it's an old age. At 91, very few passions you can indulge.
Well, let me just ask one more question because I could talk to you all day, but I'm wondering when we talk about what's happening with the White House Press Association, we talk about the Associated Press not being allowed into the Oval Office and the massive layoffs. You know, I was on the receiving end of one of those last November. Do you think that a free press can survive Trump 2.0? What happens if
It's got to. I mean, if a free press is no longer available, the other freedoms in this country will no longer be available. The press doesn't bring freedom, but it covers freedoms, and it covers injustices, and it covers stories that would attack freedom, and people would attack people. And we've got to be there. In his first term, he tried to take this. Jim Acosta talked about the CNN guy pass away, and I was one of those who was asked to write a little history of the White House press room and the question of whose pass gets taken away. And a federal judge forced the White House to not take his pass away. And that judge was nominated and confirmed, but the nomination came from Donald J. Trump. It was one of his judges. So, I don't say the courts can't hold. They can hold. But as Andrew Jackson said when Chief Justice Marshall went, well, he's made his decision, now let him try to enforce it. In other words, or Joseph Stalin, how many divisions does the Pope have? The courts depend, basically, at the end of the day, on public opinion to support their decisions and force those who don't want to do it. But I keep coming back. We are at this flashpoint now. There's no time to waste. In other words, tomorrow won't come if we say we can put this off to tomorrow and we can worry about this later on. But we have to worry about it right now.
Sam, thank you very much. You're a pleasure to visit with and a blessing for the country.
Oh, come on, Senator. I used to say, and I still believe it today, I can't prove it anymore. Most of the politicians I've ever met and known were good people trying to serve their constituents, not on the take, not well, one of them went to jail, one senator, that's abscam. But the point is, today, I still think they're good human beings in the sense, but they're frightened. They're afraid of him. He's become, with his base supports him. His base would support anything he says, anything he does at the moment. Too many Americans who are also good people. It's interesting, Senator. I use this illustration because it actually happened. I was on one side of it. If you run off the road into the ditch, and your car and a guy comes along in a pickup truck with a chain, well, usually now, even today, stop and say, "Can I help you out?" And no one asks, "Who did you vote for? What side of this are you on? How do you feel about abortion? But how do you feel about Trump?" Pulls him out and goes on his way. We still have that capacity, I think. I've got to believe that.
We have much more in common than we have differences, and that's a fact.
Yeah. You'll pull me out of the ditch next time.
Thanks.
All right, Senator, final thoughts from that conversation. Another history lesson.
Boy, no kidding. It's as always, I could sit here and listen to him talk all day long. I mean, it's like I turned the TV on in 1970. I mean, it's 1980, 1990. I mean, 2000s. I mean, he's a incredible amount of information there about how things worked and how things need to work today. And certainly appreciate him being on the podcast, that's for sure. And we wish him the best.
You know, what's so amazing to me is he is 91 years old. 91 years old, and he has that mental acuity. I don't have that recall at 40.
He's bringing up quotes from Winston Churchill and everybody else. And I'm sitting here going, wow, man, that's pretty good. I like that.
We have a little bit of listener feedback to get to. First,
Right?
you have more love from Canadians. They love you. They're thankful for you. They want to see more of you. We have more calls for you to run again for office. And Carol would like to know your thoughts on efforts to fight Citizens United. That's the Supreme Court decision that basically decided businesses have the same rights as people. It changed our campaign finance laws to allow unlimited election spending by corporations. She wants to know if there's a particular organization she should back or support when it comes to that topic.
Well, there's an organization out there called End Citizens United that has done some great work on trying to end Citizens United that says that corporations are people, and we all know that corporations are people. But there actually is even more that needs to be done as far as reinstating what Montana used to have, and that's caps, so that the folks who have so much money are capped, and so is everybody else. By the way, everybody's treated equally. And I think that makes sense. If you were in Montana this last election cycle, or in places like Ohio, or places like Pennsylvania, you saw never-ending ads over and over and over again. I can tell you from a Republican, Democrat, bipartisan standpoint, I think people are sick of this crap. And I can tell you that I don't think it helps Democrats. I don't think it helps Republicans with, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent in a place like Montana. And I think if you want to force candidates out to talk to people, we're talking about town halls now. People don't do town halls. If you started forcing people out during campaigns to talk to people rather than just running TV ads and digital ads, it would make this democracy work better. And the group out there that I'm most familiar with, and there are probably a lot of others, by the way, that's doing this kind of work, would be End Citizens United. But this is an issue that Sheldon Whitehouse is very, very, very engaged on, the senator from Rhode Island. And I'll do some work and see if I can give you more than just one in future podcasts of a direction to go. But if you go up and Google End Citizens United, that organization should come up. But like I said, there may be others too.
Before we go, though, let's talk about that hat. I can't really see it. It's a brown hat.
It's old school. It's let's see here. I'll put it up here. It's an Olympia beer hat. And the reason I wear an Olympia beer hat is because it feels like spring outside. And with spring comes, a lot of hard out physical work. And after you get done doing a lot of physical work, it's always good to have a beer. I think they still make Olympia beer, but who knows for sure. I've had this hat for a while because the bill's kind of broke. It's been through the washing machine 3 or 4 times. But I just thought as a salute to spring, I thought I'd wear the Oli beer hat.
And he's missing his time in Hawaii, which leads me to, I brought a hat today. Okay. Aloha.
Yeah. How many more months you going to stay there?
I'm going to come home. It's time. The weather's warming up. It's time to come home. But we have enjoyed our time here in Hawaii. And I want to say thank you so much to our guest, the legendary Sam Donaldson, who just still continues to crack me up and entertain me and inform me and educate me to this day. You can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can shoot us an email at groundedpcast@gmail.com. And also thanks so much to our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. And to all of you, our listeners, we'll chat again soon.
Now we hope.